So I'm guessing you might already guess what the scripture is because it's Epiphany Sunday. Epiphany, what's an epiphany? Epiphany is simply an aha moment. Aha! Something is revealed. And that's what happened when the wise men found Jesus. Now remember, they had traveled a long way. Lori talked about, a long 2-day trip in the car. Well, we're talking maybe weeks and weeks by camel. And they did not have cushions. So it was rough every time they got off. It took them a while before they could fully stand up again. And yet they continued on the journey. So wise men, they had that epiphany when they actually saw the Christ child. That's why we call this Epiphany Sunday. Epiphany is that aha moment when God is revealed to the world. And that's the other part about the wise men. Now, sometimes we see them as wise men. Lots of times you see them depicted as kings. They all got crowns. We got crowns up here. Nowhere in Scripture does it say that they were kings. We don't even fully know what wise men means, except that we look at it as people who were learned. They were highly skilled at navigating the stars. They knew about prophecies and other things. They have been watching and waiting, and we don't know much about them. They came from the East. We do know that. They were not Jewish in any way, shape, or form. We know that. We know that they brought gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Thank you very much. 3 gifts. Those 3 gifts total a great deal of money. A great deal of money. And that would have been the money that actually Jesus' family would have used when they were refugees down in Egypt. Thank goodness Egypt had their doors open. And they went down there and they were safe and secure down in Egypt until Herod died up in the land of Judah, and they could return safe once again. That's really about all we know about them. We don't know a whole lot more. But see if you learn anything else as we read this scripture from Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the reign of King Herod. About that time, some wise men from the eastern lands arrived in Jerusalem asking, "Where is the newborn King of the Jews? We saw his star as it rose, and we have come to worship him." King Herod was deeply disturbed when he heard this, as was everyone in Jerusalem. He called a meeting of the leading priests and teachers of religious law and asked, "Where's the Messiah supposed to be born?" "In Bethlehem in Judah," they said, for this is what the prophet spoke. "And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not least among the ruling cities of Judah. For a ruler will come from you who will be the shepherd of my people Israel." And that comes from Micah, the 5th chapter. When Herod called for a private meeting with the wise men, and he learned from them the time when the star first appeared, then he told them, "Go to Bethlehem and search carefully for the child. And when you find him, come back and tell me so that I may go and worship him too." After this interview, the wise men went their way. And the star they had seen in the east guided them to Bethlehem. It went ahead of them and stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were filled with joy. They entered the house and saw the child with his mother, Mary. And they bowed down and worshiped him. Then they opened their treasure chests and gave him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. When it was time to leave, they returned to their own country by another route, for God had warned them in a dream not to return to Herod. So there's one other thing that I would bring up about the wise men, but before I do that, from listening to the scripture, was there anything else that you learned about them that we hadn't already said? Okay, we got that covered. The last thing I would bring up that we didn't fully cover is their purpose. Now, we know their purpose was to find this new King of the Jews. We've got that. But did you see what they wanted to do when they found him? They wanted to worship him. Did you hear that? Worship him. Now remember, these are people coming from the Far East. Why would they want to come and worship this king? Because they knew there was something special about this king, who was still just a baby. Now, we do not believe that the wise men arrived on the same night as the shepherds. We believe it was sometime later. Literally, it could have been months or even years later. It didn't all happen on the same night. We know that. So they didn't actually find him like in the barn, in the stable, but they still would have found a pretty poor family living somewhere in Bethlehem. Not the place you would go to find a newborn king. And yet they bowed down and worshiped him. That's what they did first. They didn't give him the gifts first. They worshiped him first. You see, this is part of that epiphany. Aha, this is him. Another term we use in theology is a theophany. Ooh, isn't that a big word? It means when God reveals himself. And that's what happens here. God is revealing himself, but in the form of a baby. Isn't that kind of crazy when you think about it? Why would he do that? And yet we know that he did that so that he could be with us face to face. You're going to hear me use that phrase all the time because I love that phrase. Because I believe that that's what God desires, face to face. And that's how they got to see him. And they worshiped him. They didn't even exactly know who he was, but they know that this baby came from God and he was a king. He wasn't a king by name. He wasn't a king because the people elected him king. He was king because God had ordained it. Now, did they fully understand that this baby was God in human flesh, Emmanuel? No, they didn't get that part. But they knew he was a king. And they bowed down and they worshiped him. And I love it. And a lot of the translations, it talks about how when they left rejoicing. Rejoicing. Because they had found what they had been looking for so long. I totally get that part. And they were able to leave their gifts and they were able to worship. You know, this is one of those moments and times when we have the epiphany that Jesus came for everybody. He didn't just come for the Jews. If he had just come for the Jews, the shepherds would have been enough because they were Jewish. They worshiped the baby. But that was not enough. We needed to bring people from far off countries out east because Jesus came for them too. The same way he came for us. He came for you. He came for everyone. Even as a small baby, this has been revealed, that Jesus came for everyone. That's really important for us to understand. Now, not everyone's going to receive him. Herod would be one of those. It sounds at the beginning like, whoa, Herod wants to worship him too. Hey, when you guys find him, let me know. Herod's a bad dude. He's just a bad guy through and through. He is a bad guy. How do we know it? Because there's a scripture that comes up not too far from this one where he comes in and slaughters every single male child below the age of 12, seeking to kill this king. That was his whole desire. He does not want the competition at all. At all. So even though he sounds good here, we know he's a bad guy. And that's why it says they had been warned in a dream and they didn't return through Jerusalem. They went another route just so that they would not have to confront Herod, so that they would be safe. See, God was leading them. The gifts. Was it theirs to give? Did they have benefactors who said, take and use this on your drink? We don't know. Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. All things of great value. And so on Epiphany, we always talk about what are the gifts that we bring to God. Now, I already know that you're aware we have an offering and we've already done it, so don't worry, we're not doing a second one. But to me, the offering is one of the greatest parts of the worship service. because it's where we get to give a small part of what God has already given us. It's part of our gifts back to God. That's what the offering is. Just like the wise men gave, we give. We don't do it out of some perfunctory thing that we're supposed to do. We don't do it to keep the lights on, although it's nice to keep the lights on. We do it out of joy, to give back to God just a small part of what he's given us. Just like the wise men. And you know, we're starting in January. First Sunday in January. Man, that is still crazy to me. Isn't that crazy to you? That this is 2024? I still have to remember that every time. I don't write it anywhere. I type it in places. It's 2024. And when I think about the gifts the wise men brought, I have to think about what are the gifts that I bring. And God, how am I using the gifts that you have given me to make a difference in this world for you? What are my gifts? Now, I give my 10%. And I love giving my 10%. I really do. And I make sure that I do other things and work in missions and do all of that. But I have found one of the greatest gifts that I have that I can give to God is my time. I mean, seriously, it's my time. Because so often that's my most valuable thing. That is sometimes the hardest thing that I can find, time. And I'll be honest, I want to spend time with God every day, but there are days when everything crunches in and I don't get to do that as well as I might want to. Maybe you've had days like that. And there may be some of you in the room that, quite honest, you don't know how to spend time with God. I mean, let's face it, you sit there and you go, okay, I'm here, God. Now what? You ever had those experiences? So, I have a gift for you to help you in this coming year. Because my hope is that as we give the gift of time to God, it's going to make even a huge difference in the life of this church. And we already do some incredible things. I can't wait to see what might happen. So I have created, now this is going to be a little crinkled and you'll understand why in a little bit. But I have created for you, it is called a quiet time commitment and outline. Yes, I am seeking a commitment from you. This is an outline to spend 30 minutes with God every day. 30 minutes. And I am seeking you to covenant to spend 30 minutes with God every day. Some of you, you already do that. You don't need this. Forget it. For some of you, though, you're like, I would love to do that. I don't know how to do that. So here's an outline. And you're going to go, 30 minutes? Are you kidding? I can barely get through a commercial, and that's like 2.5 minutes. How am I going to spend 30 minutes with God? It's all right. I got you covered. I've broken this down. So 5 minutes in praise, 5 minutes in confession, 10 minutes reading scripture, 10 minutes in prayer. You're like going, 10 minutes? Seriously, in prayer? I can't pray for 10 minutes. Yes, you can, because I've outlined how. I've outlined how you can praise. I've outlined the scriptures that you can read. It is all here for you. This is a gift for you. There's even a place at the top where you can sign it and date it. And of course, you know, we'll collect these and we'll check on you. No. We're not doing that. We are not doing that. This is just for you, between you and God. This paper, this covenant, 30 minutes with God. And here's the thing. I'm not asking you to do this forever. I'm only asking you to do it for 30 days. That's it. 30 minutes a day for 30 days. That's it. And here's the kicker. If you get to the end of 30 days and you have done this, I'm going to ask you to evaluate. And if you evaluate and you go, you know what? This spending time with God, this has done nothing for my life. Nothing has changed. This is ridiculous. This is a waste of my 30 minutes. All right. Done. But I don't think that's going to happen. So I think if you begin to spend just 30 minutes with God, you'll be amazed at the changes it brings in you and through you into the world. You can decide when. You can do it at the beginning of your day. That's when I find it best. You can do it at the end of the day. You could do it on your lunch hour. You could do it even while you're working, and I'm not going to tell a soul. You figure out what works for you. 30 minutes a day for 30 days. All outlined. You sign it. Make the covenant between you and God. Because that's the only one who'll be checking. And here's the thing. If you miss a day, you are already forgiven. This is not about guilt. So many people try and put guilt in this. Oh, I missed 2 days. Oh, now I need an hour with God. Oh, I missed 3. How am I going to? No, let it go. Start that day. This is not about guilt. It's about a relationship. That's what this is about. So these papers you are going to find on the welcome desk out back if you want it. We have so many copies there, it might run out. If it runs out, you need to know that this is available on our website, trinityonjackson.org. You can find this paper. 30 minutes a day for 30 days. Just you and God. It's amazing what could happen. You know, the wise men brought 3 gifts that they had. I'm guessing none of you want to drop off gold. So give them your time and see the difference that can make. The same way the wise men did. And speaking of gifts, the other gift that we're going to do today is communion. Because I think the best way to start out a year is always communion. Because communion is a gift that God has given us. Because it's in communion that God is saying, come home. God beckons us home in communion. Because I know that sometimes, even in the holidays, life throws us off track. And sometimes we can feel like we have moved far away from God. But you see, you can't get so far from God that he can't find you, that he can't get you. And that's what happens in communion. It's God saying, come home, I love you. It doesn't matter how far you have been. It doesn't matter how much you have ignored me. It doesn't matter what you have done. Come home. You are forgiven. You are loved.